Hey everyone, Draco Magnius here for, I guess you'd call it an update. As stated at the end of the Prototype Let's Play, and the Lone Survivor Let's Play, we have a Radioactive Piggy Reduction Let's Play project coming up next. And by the end of this statement, you'll figure out what that is, or at least you'll have some idea of what that is from the next picture that's about to be shown. Now, as you may or may not know, I have some new subscribers after all. My very first Let's Play was The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. And I got to thinking, well, I did Skyward Sword, why not do the other games in the Legend of Zelda timeline? And I got the Hyrule Historia, so I'm a good amount informed. Then I thought, wait a minute, Draco, that's kind of selfish. You know there's other fans of the Legend of Zelda series in Radioactive Piggy Reduction, so I had a new idea. I call it Radioactive Piggy Reductions. Well, I don't have to include that. Let's call it the Share Play of the Legend of Zelda Timeline. How this is going to work is each one of us in Radioactive Piggy Productions is going to get a specific part of the timeline that we will do all the games in that timeline, with each of us having a game in the very first timeline. As you can see, the timeline is split into 4 separate timelines. These timelines include The Legend of the Goddess and the Hero, or as we're going to call it from this point on, the Base Timeline, The Decline of Hyrule and the Last Hero, or as we're going to call it, the Defeated Hero Timeline, the Twilight Realm and the Legacy of the Hero, or as we're going to call it, the Cyclical Shadow Timeline, and lastly, the Hero of Winds and a New World, or as we're going to call it, the Great Discovery Timeline. Okay, now I feel like for the rest, well, at this point, I should start explaining some things about how the share play is going to work overall. As you know from me saying, I've already done my game in the base timeline, which is Skyward Sword. That means I can go straight to my timeline, whichever it is. I'm going to explain who has what timeline by reading through the actual timeline. I'll be reading excerpts from the actual Hyrule Historia, starting from the creation of Hyrule and working my way down. But before I do that, I feel like I should explain this part as well. When we finish the game that we're doing in our timeline or our base timeline, we're not going to go straight to the next one. How this is going to work is me, the Antique Gamer, and Hawk-A6 are going to do our first game in our timeline or in the base timeline, and then move on to other Let's Plays that we do. Just thought I'd clear that up so no one's confused or like, why the hell is the next Legend of Zelda of the share play not up or whatever. That being said, I'm going to start reading from the Hyrule Historia, working our way down the base timeline, and then explaining the rest and who owns what timeline. The Legend of the Goddess and the Hero. This world was created by the 3 goddesses. They did not intend to unite the regions of this world, but let the inhabitants have free reign of the land. In this world, the 3 goddesses left behind the omnipotent Triforce. The creation. The world created by the goddesses. This world was created by the 3 goddesses during a time of chaos. Din, the goddess of power, created the land. Nayru, the goddess of wisdom, created order. Quarry, the goddess of courage, created the diverse inhabitants. Upon leaving the world, the goddesses left behind the Triforce, 3 golden triangles. It is said that any wish the possessor of the Triforce desires will come true. A footnote on the side, 3 goddesses. Din, Nayru, and Quarry left each crest behind. Each of these symbols, the crest of power, wisdom, and courage, can be found in locations related to the respective goddesses. Next we have the Legacy of the Gods, the Triforce. The golden goddesses departed from the world they created and left the Triforce in the care of the goddess Hylia. It is unknown why the Triforce was left behind. The Omnipotent Triforce. The Triforce grants wishes to those who touch it. Since the Triforce does not distinguish between good or evil, it allows both good and bad wishes. A strong heart, innate ability, and the balance of the three virtues, power, wisdom, and courage, are required to be granted a wish. If one does not possess the balance of the three virtues, touches the Triforce, its three pieces split apart. The finder is left with a piece that personifies what he or she values the most. The other two pieces will appear on the hands of two individuals, chosen by the will of the goddess. One must reunite the three pieces in order to obtain true power. But that's all the stuff we already know. Something I'd like to mention here is that in the back of the Hyrule Historia, there is a manga for before Skyward Sword. This explains that there is actually a link that appeared before the link of Skyward Sword. And I would like to read a brief summary, if you will, of the manga. Well, summary is a little inaccurate now that I think about it. It's more of an entire plot summary, but not everything, as I didn't want to... If I was going to do the entire plot of the manga, I'd rather just scan all the pages and read it as like an audiobook or something, but that's neither here nor there. If anyone wants me to do that, I will, but that's irrelevant at the moment. Anywho, something I should mention is that the land on the surface before Skyloft was lifted up was known as the Land of Hylia. If I ever refer to this time ever in the future, I will simply call this era BH or before Hyrule. Anyway, this is the story of the first Link. The first Link was a hero who was framed by the man Lord Deganis, I think is how that's pronounced. The people said they no longer needed a hero anyway, so he was imprisoned. But now Demise has killed Deganis, and they ask for Link's help. It's never revealed what crime Deganis framed Link for, but hey, I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. Whatever. Anyway, Link has become a bit cynical for obvious reasons. You know, people generally tend to get pissed off when they're locked in jail for no real reason. But anyway, he loves his land regardless of its people, so he agrees to help. The goddess Hylia then arrives on a crimson loftwing to tell the people of her plan to lift them into the sky. However, she tells them that the Master Sword must be reforged by human hands so that it can be used in the land of Hylia. This is because the sword was a sword designed only for the gods to use, and for it to have any power on the land of Hylia, it must be reforged by the most honorable of heroes. So she gives it to Link. When the war begins, Link fights with Demise and is greatly wounded. Demise leaves him for dead, but the Crimson Loftwing flies down and tells Link it wishes for him to be its rider. Link agrees to be its rider, but asks the Loftwing to guide his people into the skies when Hylia raises them up. At that moment, the Master Sword becomes whole, as the three dragons, Farron, Eldin, and Lanayru offer their blessings and bestow the Triforce's power onto the blade. I'd like to take a moment here to say something. At this point, we see Hylia and the Master Sword splitting the land and raising the city. But on the next page, we see Link raising the sword skyward. These things are assumedly happening at the same time, so either there are two Master Swords, or the Master Sword exists in both the Sacred Realm and the Mortal Realm, but at this moment, since Hylia is there with the sword and gave it to Link to be reforged, he has a physical copy, while Hylia has the power of the sword manifested into a physical blade. Anyway, back to the plot. So Hylia splits the land at the same time, and at the same time, Link raises the Master Sword and plunges it into the ground, offering it to Hylia, and using its power to keep what becomes Skyloft afloat. The Master Sword rises up into the heavens with Skyloft and the Crimson Loftwing, and the people reach out to Link still on the ground, trying to bring him with them, but his wounds are too great. Before he dies, he states that he really did want to come with his comrades into the sky, but he can't. He also regrets that he couldn't fulfill his promise to be the Loftwing's rider, and passes on. It is at this moment Hylia seals away Demise and his army, and once this deed is done, she stumbles upon dead Link. She tells Link that his imprisonment was planned by the gods, because they're all a bunch of assholes. Well, no, it's because... Oh, no, wait, I actually did write that here. I mean, it was because it would make him stronger. and that the Master Sword would serve him for all eternity because he loves the land of Hylia and its people as much as she does. Hylia confesses that she feels guilty about this and shared his pain. To make up for this, she ensures his spirit will live on, and she sheds her divinity because she's an idiot. I mean, because she wants to meet with him as a human. And whenever the land of Hylia is in danger, they will be reincarnated. And also, let's be honest, most of her reincarnations, she isn't that bright. So, 1,000 years later, a young Link, the Link from Skyward Sword, stands before a Crimson Loftwing and compliments. Hello, I have long awaited this moment. For some reason, that's what I felt the Red Loftwing's eyes were saying to me. And thus ends the story of the first Link, and begins the events of Skyward Sword. Now that I've read all of that, I feel like it'd be a good idea to mention, once again, I have played Skyward Sword, and I don't want to spoil it for you, so I won't be reading anything about Skyward Sword, and we're just going to skip ahead to after Skyward Sword for the important bits. Well, summary is a little inaccurate now that I think about it. It's more of an entire plot summary, but not everything, as I didn't want to... If I was going to do the entire plot of the manga, I'd rather just scan all the pages and read it as like an audiobook or something, but that's neither here nor there. If anyone wants me to do that, I will, but that's irrelevant at the moment. Anywho... Something I should mention is that the land on the surface before Skyloft was lifted up was known as the Land of Hylia. If I ever refer to this time ever in the future, I will simply call this era BH or before Hyrule. Anyway, this is the story of the first Link. The first Link was a hero who was framed by the man Lord Magnius, I think is how that's pronounced. The people said they no longer needed a hero anyway, so he was imprisoned. But now Demise has killed Magnius, and they ask for Link's help. It's never revealed what crime Magnius framed Link for, but hey, I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. Whatever. Anyway, Link has become a bit cynical for obvious reasons. You know, people generally tend to get pissed off when they're locked in jail for no real reason. But anyway... He loves his land regardless of its people, so he agrees to help. The goddess Hylia then arrives on a Crimson Loftwing to tell the people of her plan to lift them into the sky. However, she tells them that the Master Sword must be reforged by human hands so that it can be used in the land of Hylia. This is because the sword was a sword designed only for the gods to use, and for it to have any power on the land of Hylia, it must be reforged by the most honorable of heroes. So she gives it to Link. When the war begins, Link fights with Demise and is greatly wounded. Demise leaves him for dead, but the Crimson Loftwing flies down and tells Link it wishes for him to be its rider. Link agrees to be its rider, but asks the Loftwing to guide his people into the skies when Hylia raises them up. At that moment, the Master Sword becomes whole, as the three dragons, Farron, Eldin, and Lanayru offer their blessings and bestow the Triforce's power onto the blade. I'd like to take a moment here to say something. At this point, we see Hylia and the Master Sword splitting the land and raising the city. But on the next page, we see Link raising the sword skyward. These things are assumedly happening at the same time, so either there are two Master Swords, or the Master Sword exists in both the Sacred Realm and the Mortal Realm, but at this moment, since Hylia is there with the sword and gave it to Link to be reforged, he has a physical copy, while Hylia has the power of the sword manifested into a physical blade. Anyway, back to the plot. So Hylia splits the land at the same time, and at the same time, Link raises the Master Sword and plunges it into the ground, offering it to Hylia, and using its power to keep what becomes Skyloft afloat. The Master Sword rises up into the heavens with Skyloft and the Crimson Loftwing, and the people reach out to Link still on the ground, trying to bring him with them, but his wounds are too great. Before he dies, he states that he really did want to come with his comrades into the sky, but he can't. He also regrets that he couldn't fulfill his promise to be the Loftwing's rider, and passes on. It is at this moment Hylia seals away Demise and his army, and once this deed is done, she stumbles upon dead Link. She tells Link that his imprisonment was planned by the gods, because they're all a bunch of assholes. Well, no, it's because... Oh, no, wait, I actually did write that here. I mean, it was because it would make him stronger, and that the Master Sword would serve him for all eternity, because he loves the land of Hylia and its people as much as she does. Hylia confesses that she feels guilty about this, and shared his pain. To make up for this, she ensures his spirit will live on, and she sheds her divinity because she's an idiot. I mean, because she wants to meet with him as a human. And whenever the land of Hylia is in danger, they will be reincarnated. And also, let's be honest, most of her reincarnations, she isn't that bright. So, 1,000 years later, a young Link, the Link from Skyward Sword, stands before a Crimson Loftwing and compliments. Hello, I have long awaited this moment. For some reason, that's what I felt the Red Loftwing's eyes were saying to me, and thus ends the story of the first Link, and begins the events of Skyward Sword. Now that I've read all of that, I feel like it'd be a good idea to mention, once again, I have played Skyward Sword, and I don't want to spoil it for you, so I won't be reading anything about Skyward Sword, and we're just going to skip ahead to after Skyward Sword for the important bits. Many years later, probably like a couple centuries later, the Kingdom of Hyrule, created by the Golden Goddesses and protected by the goddess Hylia, the world eventually became known as Hyrule. The Hylians, descendants of Hylia, lived in Hyrule and possessed magical abilities. After years of peace, a wave of chaos once again engulfed the land. The Era of Chaos, the battle for the Sacred Realm. The legend of a supreme power spread throughout the land, whetting the appetite of those who would possess the Triforce, and inciting vicious battles between them. Rauru, the Sage of Light, constructed the Temple of Time, which the Triforce was located. With powers stronger than both Time and the Master Sword, Rauru sealed the Sacred Realm. The pedestal holding the Master Sword was closed behind the door of Time, and the keys to opening the door, the spiritual stones of Forest, Fire, and Water, were protected by their respective people. The Triforce was placed in the Temple of Light located in the Sacred Realm, which was now isolated from Hyrule. Protecting the Triforce in the Temple of Light, Rauru became the guardian of the power of the gods. Something I'd like to mention here. Rauru appears in Ocarina of Time, but Ocarina of Time is not the second game in the timeline. In fact, it's the last one in the base timeline, meaning Rauru by Ocarina of Time has to be hundreds, if not thousands of years old. But I digress. These are some of the footnotes. Temple of Time, the only entrance to the Sacred Realm's Temple of Light. The Temple of Time shares the same name as the temple in the Lanayru Desert of the Era of the Goddess of Hylia, also Skyward Sword. It is thought that Rauru built the Temple of Time directly over the ruins of the Sealed Temple, which would make sense. Also, this means that the Master Sword and the Temple of Time exist in the second game in the base timeline, we just never see it in that game. Also, the crest of the royal family. The goddess Hylia had a bird-like crest, and the people of Skyloft rode giant birds. The crest of the royal family incorporates the historically important bird, as well as the three triangles of the Triforce. And now, we move on. The Era of Prosperity, and many years later, the establishment of Hyrule Kingdom. The descendants of the goddess Hylia, who was reincarnated as Princess Zelda, established the Kingdom of Hyrule and became Hyrule's royal family. In order to protect the Triforce, Hyrule Castle was built in the center of Hyrule, where the Temple of Time was located. The royal family watched over the Triforce, keeping its existence unknown to others. Many members of the royal family were born with special powers because of the lineage that connect them to the goddess. Princesses were repeatedly given the name Zelda, a name that came from the historical legends. Alright, next is the Quarry and the Light Force. This happens in the Force era. The Hero of Men. In the first major event to happen since the Kingdom of Hyrule was established, the world was engulfed by evil beings and shrouded in darkness, because the land of Hyrule can't have a friggin' moment without evil. But I digress. It was then the tiny Picori descended from the sky, bringing a golden light and a sword. Using the sword, the hero of men sealed the evil beings away in the bound chest, and brought... Chest, not chess. Chest. And brought peace to the world once again. The golden light was the light force. And I should really bring up this footnote now, so you understand what the light force is. A source of infinite power from the heavens that holds enormous power of the Force, which originally dwelled in all things. You know what that means, don't you, ladies and gentlemen? Link is a Jedi. Sorry, I couldn't resist. It was too easy to reference. Anyway, the royal family and the Picori. After sealing away the evil beings, the royal family of Hyrule became the careful overseers of the sword, which became known as the Picori Blade. Furthermore, the royal family kept the existence of the land of the Picori, the Minish Realm, hidden. In gratitude to the Picori, the people held a Picori festival once a year. I should also mention the Picori Blade is not the Master Sword, but a different sword entirely, meaning that the land of Hyrule has two epically powerful swords, the Master Sword that banishes evil, and the Picori Blade, which holds the force of all living things inside of it, which is pretty damn cool, honestly. Anyway, the sword fighting tournament and the Picori Blade. Legend said that every 100 years a secret door would open, and the Picori would pass through and enter the world of humans. The custom of the Picori festival had continued for many, many years. Among them was a sword fighting tournament. The award ceremony was held in front of the Picori Blade, and was the only chance to see the blade. And then the last footnote on this page, the sword fighting tournament. A tournament that happened during the Picori Festival at Hyrule Castle. The champion of the tournament was customarily presented with an award in front of the Picori Blade. And now the events of the Minish Cap happens. This is Hockey 6's base timeline game. Now we move on to the next bit. Okay, now a brief thing I would like to mention. You may have noticed when looking at the timeline that there were two entries that said 4 swords. The first 4 swords is the multiplayer to A Link to the Past, when it was re-released for the Game Boy Advanced. It is included in the timeline, and that this 4 swords is that. Now, the thing about this one is, me, Hawk-A6, and the Antique Gamer want to do this as a collab, but since it's a Game Boy Advanced game, you can imagine that's probably going to be difficult. So, as of right now, there are no plans to do it, but we are trying to find a way to do it. Anyone who has any suggestions, by all means. Anyway, because this is the case, I might just read the entire entry for this particular segment, because it's only 2 pages long. Anyway, peace was fleeting in Hyrule. Oh, sorry, I forgot to read the title. The seal is broken. Still in the Force era, by the way. Peace was fleeting in Hyrule. Vati, presumed dead, suddenly reappeared, and terror returned to the land. Vati occupied the Palace of Winds and kidnapped every beautiful young woman in Hyrule one by one. That was when the hero, carrying the legendary 4-sword, or Picori Blade, and anyway, tapping into the sword's power, the hero's body split into 4, and the combined power of the heroes was enough to defeat Vati. Vati was sealed in the 4-sword and enshrined in the Elemental Sanctuary. There's 3 footnotes, I guess I'll read them now. Vati the Wind Mage. Vati, who has no memory of his life as a Picori, goes on a mindless rampage with the ability to manipulate the wind. Vati calls himself the Wind Mage and takes over the Palace of Winds. The hero of the 4-sword. Not much is known about the origin of this hero, but it is possible that he is a descendant of the Link who defeated Vati previously, because Vati is the last boss in the Minish Cap. And finally, the kidnapped Princess Zelda. Vati kidnaps Princess Zelda to make her his bride in commemoration of his resurrection, not to obtain the Light Force. But you know, you kind of have to feel a little sad for Vati at that point. He used to be this big, powerful guy now can't even remember why the hell he does anything. Goes, yeah, I'll just marry a couple women, celebrate that I'm out of that seal. Because, E-rated game, kids say, hey, I want to plow some women. But, moving on. The resurrection of the Wind Mage. For generations, Princess Zelda and her descendants looked after the sealed Four-Sword. But a day came when the seal began to weaken. When Princess Zelda went to check on the seal, it broke. Vati escaped his prison, kidnapped Zelda, and took her to the Palace of Winds. The power of the Four-Sword. Link witnessed the resurrection of the evil Vati. Shortly after, a fairy appeared to Link and instructed him to draw the legendary Four-Sword. As he did so, he split into four. The great fairies said that they could help Link get to the Palace of Winds, but he first had to prove his courage by defeating dangerous foes and collecting rupees. Because let's be honest, when you need to save the world from a monster, you need money. Let's throw money at Vati! That's how we'll beat him! Yeah! Anyway, the four heroes. After Link collected rupees from the three regions protected by the three great fairies and earned the titles of Little Eggs, Brave Heroes, and finally the Greatest of Heroes, the Links were given the keys to the Palace of Winds, now known as Vati's Palace. After earning the keys, Vati's Palace appeared, and the four Links set off to confront the Wind Mage, because again, if you want to save the world, you need to pay as much money as you physically can. Well, the three great fairies are kind of bitches, aren't they? Anyway, the three great fairies, this is a footnote. The Great Fairy of Forest protects the region known as the Sea of Trees. The Great Fairy of Ice protects the tallest cave. And the Great Fairy of Flame protects Death Mountain. And finally, the Palace of Winds reappears. The four Links confront Vati in the depths of the palace. Using their combined power, the four Links attacked Vati, defeating him and rescuing Princess Zelda. Vati was once again sealed in the Four-Sword, and the Four-Sword was returned to its proper place in the pedestal. With the power of the Four-Sword once again dormant, the four Links merged back into a single body. Princess Zelda and the people of Hyrule again kept strict watch over the seal. And again, why does no one kill the final boss and just seal them up? Seriously, people, he'll come back. It's just common knowledge. When you make a seal, someone will break it. Just stab them in the eye or the face or whatever and kill them. Whatever, I'm going to move on now. Era of the Hero of Time. Hyrule Kingdom in chaos. Hyrule engulfed by the fires of war, and the kingdom united. The war in Hyrule raged unabated for countless eras. In the midst of the confusion, a lone woman fled the fires of war, babe in arms, and escaped to the Forbidden Forest. She entrusted her child to the spirit of the Kokiri Forest, the Deku Tree. The Deku Tree, sensing that the infant's destiny was intertwined with Hyrule's future, took the child in. Once the child's mother had breathed her last breath, the babe was raised as a Kokiri. This boy would later become Link, the hero. The fighting was eventually quelled by the King of Hyrule, and the entire land was unified under his kingdom. A brief tranquility. The scars of war fade from Hyrule, and it seemed that at last the world was at peace. Ganondorf, leader of the Gerudo, the people of the desert, once again swore fealty to the King of Hyrule. However, Ganondorf's true aim was the Triforce, said to lie somewhere within the kingdom. Seeking the three spiritual stones necessary to open the gateway to the sacred realm, he carried out his plots in secret in every corner of the land. This is where the Ocarina of Time happens, and this is the Antique Gamers game in the base timeline, and the last one of the base timeline. Now, we move on to who gets what timeline. I should mention, before we start, that there will be spoilers in the beginnings of the Great Discovery timeline and the Cyclical Shadow timeline. We're starting with the Defeated Hero timeline, which is pretty self-explanatory, but here we go. The Decline of Hyrule and the Last Hero. Of all possible outcomes, Link, The hero of time faced defeat at the hands of Ganondorf. The thief obtained the 3 pieces of the Triforce, transformed into Demon King Ganon, and continued to threaten the world in future eras. The conflict surrounding the Triforce continued without end. The blood of the gods weakened, and the kingdom of Hyrule shrank to a shadow of its former glory. The Demon King Ganon obtains the complete Triforce. The hero of time is defeated. Ganon the Thief obtained the Triforce of Power and managed to get his hands on Princess Zelda. The hero of time, Link, challenged him in a battle that would determine Hyrule's very existence, and lost. The 7 sages seal away the Demon King. At last, Ganondorf found himself in possession of the Triforce of Wisdom that dwelt within Princess Zelda, and the Triforce of Courage that dwelt in Link. His true power achieved, he transformed into the Demon King. The 7 sages of Hyrule, led by Princess Zelda somehow, even though she had already died. Anyway, sealed Ganon and the Triforce into the Sacred Realm as a final resort. It's good to have a backup plan, but seriously, how could he possibly have gotten Princess Zelda's Triforce without killing her? I don't know. Kind of a plot hole, but we'll ignore it for now. Many years later, the Imprisoning War. For a brief time, it seemed as though peace had returned to the kingdom. However, there were many who knew of the existence of the Triforce and the entrance to the Sacred Realm because of the events set in motion by Ganondorf. Their lust aroused, they rushed to gain access to the Holy Land in their quest to obtain the power of the gods. Little did they realize that the Sacred Realm had been transformed into the Dark World by Ganondorf's evil heart. None returned from their adventures. Instead, only the power of darkness flowed forth. The Sacred Realm is sealed by the sages. The King of Hyrule ordered the 7 sages to seal the Sacred Realm. The Knights of Hyrule guarded the sages as they offered up their prayers, but the demons descended upon them from within the Sacred Realm, and a fierce battle unfolded which the majority of the combatants were killed. The entrance to the Sacred Realm was sealed once again, tight enough that it should never have been reopened. A footnote here, the Knights of Hyrule. The Knights of Hyrule were a clan that protected the royal family. Their members descended from the hero who governed the Crest of Courage. Legend has it, the hero will one day reappear within their ranks. Looking back through the ages, it is possible that Link, the hero of time, was once a Hylian knight himself. This may be the reason his mother became embroiled in the flames of war. Before an Ocarina of Time, of course. And the last thing I'll read here. The Hylian bloodline weakens. Until the era of the Hero of Time, the Kingdom of Hyrule was mostly inhabited by Hylian people, whose existence was linked to their goddess Hylia. Hylians possessed a special power. It is said that their long ears allowed them to hear the voices of the gods. However, the kingdom fell into ruin during the Imprisoning War, and the bloodline of the Hylians weakened with the ages, until their existence was naught but a thing of the past. The sages' powers also waned, and Hyrule, once called the Kingdom of Gods, became nothing more than an ancient legend. This is the Antique Gamer's timeline. It kind of fits, considering he's, the Antique Gamer, and all of the games in this timeline are retro games from the NES era, and there's some of Game Boy Color. They're all really old games. And the Link Between Worlds game is going to fit in this timeline as well, so when that comes out, he'll eventually have to do it too. Anyway, we now move on to the Cyclical Shadow timeline, the Twilight Realm and the Legacy of the Hero. The Hero of Time was victorious, successfully sealing away Ganon. Link returned to his original time and met with Princess Zelda, setting a new timeline into motion. An alternate history of Hyrule. The Return of the Hero of Time. Princess Zelda used her power to rewind the 7 years that Link had spent sleeping, and restored the hero to his original era. Upon returning, Link wasted no time in making for Hyrule Castle Courtyard. There he found Princess Zelda watching Ganondorf, just as she had been when they first met. I'll read the footnotes now instead of later. The heroes return. Link finds himself back in the Temple of Time. The Master Sword has not yet been drawn from its pedestal, and the way to the Sacred Realm has yet to be opened. His companion Navi disappears into the heaven for some unexplained reason, and Link steps into a new timeline. The Triforce of Courage. Link bears the proof of his courage on the back of his hand, because Ganondorf was sealed away along with the Triforce of Power in the future. The rest of the Time Force remained within the Chosen Ones, meaning that Zelda probably has the Triforce on her hand as well at this current moment in time. It would also mean that Ganon in this timeline would too, but we're not going to talk about that for now. A portent of the future. Link warned Princess Zelda of what the future would bring. Hearing his words, the princess entrusted the Ocarina of Time to Link and instructed him to travel far away in order to prevent Ganondorf from entering the Sacred Realm. Just then the mark of the Triforce appeared on the back of Link's hand began to glow. Link the hero, who had won his battle against the great evil in the world of the future, left on a secret journey. Link's departure. Link set off on his horse Epona, who lived at Lon Lon Ranch. Months passed as he wandered in search of his companion Navi, eventually losing himself in a mysterious forest, which happened... it just so happened that this forest led to the parallel world known as Termina, and this is where Majora's Mask begins. This is my timeline, and I will be doing Majora's Mask as soon as I can. Alright, last and certainly not least, the timeline of Great Discovery, or the Great Discovery timeline. Irrelevant. The hero of winds and a new world. Ganondorf, the thief, had obtained the Triforce of Power and transformed into the Demon King Ganon. The hero of time successfully sealed away his foe. Victorious, he then departed to his original era, and purity began to return to the world once more. However, Hyrule's troubles continued. Peace is restored to Hyrule by the hero of time. The hero returns to his original era. With the help of the sages and the hero of time, Princess Zelda sealed away Ganon and returned Link to his original era. Because, come on, what are the chances of Ganon breaking free of a seal? No evil's ever broken free from a seal in the entirety of this game series, right? Let's move on. To ensure the Sacred Realm could not be reopened, she put the Master Sword back into its pedestal and closed the door of time. The passage between eras was sealed, and the Triforce of Courage continued its slumber somewhere in the land. The hero of time returns, is a footnote. Upon returning to his original era, Link replaces the Master Sword in its pedestal and brings his beloved horse Epona back to Lon Lon Ranch. The purification of Hyrule. The dark clouds that had gathered over Hyrule parted, and the light began to return to the world. However, once enough time had passed, the deeds of the hero of time had faded into legend. The creeping hands of evil beset the kingdom once more. The deeds of the hero of time are passed on as legend. Even in the eras after the kingdom of Hyrule vanishes from the earth, the legend of the hero of time and the kingdom where the power of the gods slumbered continued to be passed on from generation to generation. From the hero's green garb to the details of his departure, the events of the story were handed down in the form of a scroll, becoming a legend from a bygone era. This is where the Wind Waker starts, and this is Hawk A6's timeline. Okay, now we move on to stuff like when we're starting this. As I said, I'm going to start Majora's Mask as soon as I can. In regards to when the others are going to start, the Antique Gamer said he was going to start as soon as I start with Majora's Mask. I assume as soon as he can. So we're going to be starting initially around the same time. In regards to Hawk A6, however, he's been having computer troubles, so he might take a little longer to start his, but he should, in theory, be starting soon. But anyway, that about does it for this video. I've told you enough story and lore behind The Legend of Zelda for now. If anyone's curious about it, I might do a video where I read the entirety of the The Legend of Zelda timeline, if enough people want me to read it to them. I also might do an audio manga of it if I ever feel like it. Oh, but this is definitely something I really wanted to bring up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the picture that has the base timeline, right? And I'm going to upload it onto Radioactive Piggy Productions, the collab channel. And I'm going to make an interactive thing where you click on one of the pictures of the games and you'll go straight to one of the playlists. Just cause I felt like doing that. It might be something cool to do, and maybe, well, it'll be interesting. You can watch all of them in the order once they get finished. Like, I'll have the caption on Skyward Sword that'll lead to my first Let's Play. When Hawk-A6 has started his, I'll put Spotlight on the Minish Cap, and you get the idea from there. But, yeah, that pretty much does it for this announcement. I'll see you guys in Majora's Mask.